The day the silver wolf finally answered her call, even kings remembered how to kneel. Aurora Hale had spent 22 years mastering the art of looking small. In the Northern Territories, where strength was measured by the power of the wolf within, being invisible was often safer than being noticed. Every morning before sunrise, she crossed the frost-covered paths of Ash Hollow Pack, carrying baskets of fresh herbs gathered from the forest edge. The crisp mountain air filled her lungs while distant howls echoed through towering pine trees, each one reminding her of the secret sleeping beneath her own heartbeat. The other wolves believed she had never shifted. They whispered that the moon goddess had forgotten her. Some pitied her, while many simply laughed. Aurora never answered. She lowered her eyes, smiled politely, and continued walking as if every careless word slipped past her like autumn leaves carried away by the wind. No one noticed how tightly she curled her fingers whenever another wolf transformed nearby. No one saw the silver glow that sometimes flickered deep inside her eyes before she blinked it away. She had promised long ago that no one ever would. The village square buzzed with excitement as banners decorated every wooden post beneath the pale morning sky. The moon trial would begin before sunset, bringing every unmated wolf together beneath the ancient stone circle where futures were often decided in a single night. Young alphas proudly displayed their confidence while betas rehearsed formal greetings, hoping to impress visiting nobles. Omegas gathered in quiet groups, adjusting dresses stitched with careful hands and exchanging nervous smiles. Aurora remained alone near the old well, carefully arranging bundles of lavender and cedar for the evening ceremony. "Careful," someone called with an amused laugh. "You might scare the moon goddess away before she even gets here." More laughter followed. Aurora recognized every voice without looking. She had heard the same jokes since childhood. Broken Omega, empty soul, girl without a wolf. She simply tied another bundle together and thanked the customer who quietly accepted it with an apologetic smile. Kindness always survived somewhere, even inside a crowd that had forgotten how to see it. Across the square, the arrival of the royal escort silenced every conversation. Horses slowed to a graceful stop, while polished armor reflected the morning light. At the center rode Alpha King Rowan Ashcroft. Tall, composed, and calm, he carried none of the loud confidence displayed by younger alphas. His authority rested in quiet certainty rather than intimidation. As he dismounted, every member of the pack lowered their heads in respect. Rowan acknowledged them with a simple nod before his silver-gray eyes drifted across the gathering. He was searching for nothing in particular, yet something unfamiliar brushed against his senses. It was not a scent exactly. It felt older than scent, older than memory, like moonlight touching frozen water. The feeling vanished almost immediately. Rowan turned, expecting to find one of the visiting elders behind him. Instead, he caught a brief glimpse of a young woman lifting a basket beside the old well. For the smallest fraction of a second, sunlight reflected in her eyes, revealing a flash of brilliant silver unlike anything he had ever seen. Then she lowered her gaze, and the strange sensation disappeared completely. Rowan remained still. His beta noticed the hesitation. "Your Majesty?" Rowan looked away, though the question lingered inside him. "Nothing," he answered quietly. "Or perhaps, something I have forgotten." Aurora felt his attention before she ever dared to look up. Her pulse quickened, not because she feared the Alpha King, but because something deep within her answered his presence with a warmth she had not felt in years. Beneath every careful breath, beneath every practiced smile, beneath every quiet step she had taken to remain unnoticed, another heartbeat seemed to awaken, slow and ancient, waiting patiently in the silence. And somewhere far beyond the mountains, hidden behind clouds gathering around the rising moon, an old promise was beginning to remember her name. The strange warmth lingering inside Aurora refused to fade even after the royal escort disappeared beyond the towering gates of Ash Hollow Manor. She gathered the last bundle of herbs from the wooden stall and slipped quietly toward the narrow forest trail she had followed nearly every day since childhood. The sounds of celebration slowly faded behind her, replaced by whispering pines and the steady rhythm of a nearby stream flowing over smooth gray stones. This was the only place where she could breathe without feeling every curious glance resting upon her shoulders. The deeper she walked beneath the ancient trees, the lighter her chest became, Yet another feeling slowly rose beneath that fragile peace. It was the same feeling she had buried for nearly 15 years. She reached a small clearing where wildflowers surrounded a weathered stone covered in silver moss. Kneeling carefully, Aurora brushed away a thin layer of fallen leaves until the familiar carving appeared beneath her fingertips. It was not a grave, although anyone passing by would have believed it was. There was no name engraved into the smooth rock, only the shape of a crescent moon surrounded by delicate branches. Aurora rested her hand upon the symbol and closed her eyes. "I kept my promise, grandmother," she whispered. "No one knows." The wind answered first, carrying the scent of cedar through the clearing. Then memories returned as clearly as if they had never left. She was only 7 years old when the impossible happened. While other children chased butterflies across the meadow outside the village, Aurora had wandered deeper into the forest searching for an injured white rabbit she believed she had heard crying. Instead, she found an ancient wolf resting beside a spring hidden beneath hanging vines. Its fur shimmered with silver brighter than fresh snow beneath full moonlight, and its eyes reflected the stars even though the sun stood high above the trees. She remembered feeling no fear, only familiarity. The magnificent creature had slowly approached before lowering its enormous head until their foreheads touched. The moment their skin met, light surrounded the clearing. The trees trembled although there was no wind. Tiny silver leaves drifted upward instead of falling. When the light faded, the ancient wolf had vanished. Aurora had looked down at her own hands and discovered glowing silver markings stretching across her arms before disappearing beneath her skin. She had raced home believing she had discovered magic. Her grandmother Eleanor had taken one look at her and immediately locked every door and window before drawing the curtains against the afternoon sun. Aurora had never forgotten the expression in her grandmother's gentle blue eyes. It was not fear. It was sorrow mixed with fierce determination. Eleanor had knelt before her granddaughter and placed both hands around the child's trembling fingers. "Listen carefully," she had said with a voice softer than falling snow. "You were never forgotten by the moon goddess. You were chosen long before you were born." Aurora had smiled with innocent excitement until her grandmother continued. "That is why no one must ever see what lives inside you." Confusion replaced happiness. "Why?" she had asked. Eleanor looked toward the darkened window before answering. "Because there are gifts so rare that frightened hearts will mistake them for danger. The world remembers stories about the silver wolf, but stories become greed when power is involved. If they discover who you are before destiny calls your name, they will spend the rest of their lives trying to own what should never belong to anyone." That evening her grandmother had wrapped a simple silver thread around Aurora's wrist. It looked ordinary, almost fragile, yet the moment it touched her skin the glowing markings disappeared completely. "This will help you sleep," Eleanor explained. "It will hide your true scent and quiet the ancient spirit until the proper time arrives. Promise me something." Aurora nodded immediately. "Do not awaken your wolf because someone mocks you. Do not awaken your wolf because someone rejects you. Only awaken when your heart tells you there is no other path left." Aurora had promised without understanding the weight of those words. Years passed. Her grandmother taught her healing herbs instead of hunting. She taught patience instead of pride. She taught kindness when others expected anger. Most importantly, she taught silence. After Eleanor passed away, the silver thread remained around Aurora's wrist every single day. No one questioned the simple bracelet because it appeared to be nothing more than an old family keepsake. Aurora opened her eyes and looked down at it now. For the first time in many years, the delicate thread felt warm against her skin. Not hot, not painful, simply alive. A faint pulse traveled beneath her fingertips before disappearing again. She slowly stood and looked toward the distant mountains where the moon trial would begin before sunset. Somewhere beyond those peaks, Alpha King Rowan Ashcroft was preparing for the same ceremony. Aurora could not explain why, but the moment his silver-gray eyes had met hers that morning, something buried deep inside her had answered with quiet recognition. She drew a slow breath, turned away from the silent stone, and began walking back toward the village, unaware that high above the forest, hidden beyond drifting clouds, a single silver hawk circled once before flying north as though carrying news that an ancient promise had finally begun to awaken. By the time Aurora returned to Ash Hollow, the quiet village had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Lanterns hung from every porch. Ribbons of silver and deep blue fluttered between ancient oak trees, and the scent of cedar smoke mixed with fresh bread drifted through the cool evening air. The moon trial always brought hope to those searching for their future, yet to Aurora it had always felt like a celebration where she had never truly belonged. She slipped through the gathering crowd with practiced ease, keeping her eyes lowered while conversations flowed around her like a river she could never enter. Young wolves laughed with nervous excitement, parents offered gentle encouragement, and elders watched carefully from carved wooden benches surrounding the ancient stone circle. Every smile reminded Aurora of the role she had played for years, the quiet Omega who worked hard, asked for nothing, and expected even less. Near the ceremonial platform, pack leader Harrison Whitmore welcomed the visiting nobles with formal dignity, while Alpha King Rowan Ashcroft observed everything with calm, unreadable eyes. Beside him stood his trusted beta, Ethan Mercer, who quietly introduced each respected family as they approached. Rowan listened politely, yet his attention wandered again and again toward the edge of the gathering, where he sensed the same strange presence from earlier that morning. It was faint, almost impossible to grasp, like hearing the final note of a distant melody before silence returned. Ethan noticed the distraction. "Is something troubling you, Your Majesty?" Rowan answered without taking his eyes from the crowd. "There is someone here whose presence feels older than memory. Every time I believe I have found it, it disappears." Ethan glanced around the circle and smiled lightly. "Perhaps anticipation is playing tricks on all of us tonight." Rowan did not reply. His instincts had protected him for many years, and they had never mistaken imagination for truth. At the center of the ceremonial grounds, Elder Miriam raised a polished silver staff toward the bright rising moon. The conversations gradually faded until only the whisper of wind moved through the towering pines surrounding the ancient clearing. "Tonight," she announced, her warm voice carrying across the gathering, "we honor the bonds that unite our people, the promises carried by the moon goddess, and the courage to accept whatever path destiny chooses." One by one, young unmated wolves stepped forward as their names were called. Some were greeted with admiration. Others received respectful applause from family and friends. Aurora remained near the back beside an old cedar tree, hoping to remain unnoticed until the ceremony ended. She knew better than to expect destiny to call her name. Yet moments later, Elder Miriam looked down at the ancient scroll resting upon the stone altar. Her expression hesitated for the briefest instant before she spoke again. "Aurora Hale." A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Aurora closed her eyes for a heartbeat before stepping forward with calm dignity. She felt dozens of curious eyes follow every step she took across the smooth stone path leading toward the center of the circle. The silver bracelet around her wrist rested quietly against her skin, but she could not ignore the faint warmth returning beneath it. Elder Miriam smiled kindly. "Welcome, child." Aurora offered a respectful bow. Tradition required each unmated wolf to stand beneath the moon's stone, while compatible mates were invited to step forward if the sacred bond stirred within them. It was an old custom built upon hope rather than certainty. Aurora already knew what would happen. She had stood in the same place years before. No one had stepped forward then, and she expected nothing different now. Silence settled across the clearing. A gentle breeze stirred the lanterns overhead. 1 minute passed, then another. Several young wolves quietly looked away with sympathetic expressions. Others exchanged whispers they believed she could not hear. Nothing again. Poor girl. Perhaps the moon goddess truly forgot. Aurora kept her breathing slow and steady. Her grandmother's voice echoed softly within her memory. "Never awaken your wolf because someone rejects you." Her promise remained stronger than disappointment. Elder Miriam finally lowered her staff with visible sadness. The ceremony continues. Aurora nodded graciously and turned to leave the circle. Before she reached the edge of the platform, another voice suddenly interrupted the silence. "Forgive me, Elder." Every head turned. A confident young alpha named Caleb Thornton stepped forward wearing the formal colors of a respected neighboring pack. He offered Aurora a courteous smile before addressing the gathering. "I wish to speak openly, so there will be no misunderstanding." Aurora paused without looking back. Caleb continued carefully. "Several families have suggested that our packs would benefit from a future alliance. I appreciate their confidence. However, I cannot accept such expectations. My path lies elsewhere. His words remained respectful, yet everyone understood their meaning. The possibility of any future match with Aurora had just been dismissed before the entire gathering. No insults followed. No raised voices disturbed the peaceful evening. Yet the gentle disappointment settling over the crowd felt heavier than harsh criticism ever could. Aurora simply inclined her head with quiet grace. "Thank you for your honesty," she answered softly. "I wish you every happiness." She stepped away from the moonstone without another word. Her kindness surprised even those who had expected tears. Across the circle, Rowan watched every moment in complete silence. He had expected embarrassment or anger. Instead, he witnessed remarkable composure carried by someone whose heart should have been burdened by years of quiet disappointment. As Aurora passed beneath the cedar tree once more, the evening breeze lifted a strand of her pale hair across her face. For the briefest instant, she raised one hand to brush it aside. The silver bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve caught the moonlight, and Rowan felt the mysterious presence surge stronger than ever before. His heartbeat paused. Somewhere deep within his ancient wolf, something forgotten stirred for the first time in countless years. Aurora slipped away from the celebration before anyone noticed her absence, following the familiar trail that wound between towering pines toward the small cottage that had belonged to her grandmother. The cheerful music and laughter gradually faded behind her until only the quiet chorus of crickets and the gentle whisper of evening wind remained. Moonlight filtered through the branches in scattered beams, painting silver patterns across the forest floor. She had walked this path thousands of times, yet tonight every step felt different. The warmth beneath the silver bracelet had not disappeared. Instead, it pulsed softly with each heartbeat, as though listening to something far beyond the reach of ordinary ears. She paused beside the narrow stream where smooth stones reflected the rising moon and knelt to cup cool water into her hands. The reflection staring back at her seemed unchanged. Pale skin, long light hair, calm blue eyes. Yet for the briefest instant, another pair of eyes shimmered beneath the surface of the water, bright silver, ancient, and filled with quiet patience. Aurora blinked, and the vision disappeared. She drew a slow breath, reminding herself that fear had never been part of her grandmother's lessons. Back at Ash Hollow Manor, the evening banquet had begun. Long wooden tables overflowed with fresh bread, roasted vegetables, honey cakes, and warm cider, while visiting nobles exchanged stories beneath strings of glowing lanterns. Rowan Ashcroft listened politely as neighboring alphas discussed harvests, trade routes, and seasonal patrols, but his thoughts refused to settle. Again and again he recalled the faint surge of ancient energy that had surrounded Aurora when the moonlight touched the bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve. It was impossible. Every legend describing such a presence belonged to an age long forgotten, an age that most scholars considered little more than folklore. Ethan Mercer quietly approached, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. He handed one to Rowan before lowering his voice. "You have been unusually quiet tonight." Rowan accepted the cup without drinking. "Tell me something, Ethan. Have you ever felt as though your wolf recognized someone before your mind could understand why?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Only once. When I met my mate years ago. My instincts knew long before I did." Rowan slowly shook his head. "This is different. There is no familiar scent. No ordinary bond. It feels older than the oldest stories I learned as a child." Ethan smiled thoughtfully. Then perhaps the stories were never truly stories. Those simple words lingered in Rowan's mind long after the conversation ended. Late that evening, unable to ignore his growing curiosity, Rowan entered the small archive room prepared for visiting royalty inside the manor. Dust-covered rows of leather-bound journals collected from generations of pack historians. Candlelight flickered across faded pages while silence settled around him. Hours passed as he searched through records describing forgotten bloodlines, sacred wolves, and the earliest covenants between the moon goddess and the first alpha kings. Most accounts contradicted one another, but one fragile journal written nearly 300 years earlier captured his full attention. The brittle page contained only a short passage. "When the silver guardian walks unseen among ordinary wolves, even the strongest alpha shall fail to recognize the truth until the moon chooses its hour. The guardian does not seek a throne. The throne remembers the guardian." Rowan read the words again. His pulse slowed. The description matched the strange certainty growing inside him far too closely to dismiss. Before he could continue, a sharp gust swept through the open window and extinguished several candles at once. The room fell into darkness except for pale moonlight resting upon the ancient page. Outside, somewhere beyond the manor walls, a lone silver hawk crossed the sky without making a sound. At that very moment, Aurora unlocked the weathered door of her grandmother's cottage. Everything remained exactly as Eleanor had left it. Bundles of dried herbs hung from wooden beams, books rested neatly upon hand-carved shelves, and the familiar scent of lavender still lingered in the quiet rooms. Aurora gently lit a single candle before opening the old cedar chest beneath the window. Inside lay folded blankets, carefully preserved letters, and one small velvet pouch tied with faded silver thread. Her fingers hesitated before lifting it into the candlelight. She had not opened the pouch since the night her grandmother passed away. Slowly she untied the cord. A smooth crystal shaped like a teardrop rested inside, glowing with the faintest silver light. As soon as the crystal touched her palm, the bracelet around her wrist became noticeably warmer. Then another surprise followed. A folded letter hidden beneath the crystal slipped onto the wooden table. Across the front, written in Eleanor's graceful handwriting, were only a few simple words. Open this only when someone finally sees you, even after the world refuses to. Aurora stared silently at the unopened letter while the candle flame flickered beside her. She remembered Rowan's steady gaze during the ceremony, the strange pause when their eyes had briefly met, and the quiet feeling that something impossible had awakened between them. Outside, clouds slowly drifted away from the full moon, allowing brilliant silver light to pour through the cottage window. The crystal brightened. The bracelet pulsed once more. And somewhere deep within Aurora's soul, the ancient presence that had slept in perfect silence for years gently opened its eyes. Aurora remained motionless beside the small wooden table while the unopened letter rested beneath her fingertips. The cottage had become impossibly quiet, as though even the wind outside respected the promise sealed inside the faded paper. She slowly unfolded the letter, recognizing every graceful curve of Eleanor's handwriting. The ink had faded with time, yet every word remained perfectly clear. If you are reading this, my sweet child, then someone has finally looked beyond the mask you were forced to wear. Do not mistake curiosity for destiny, but do not ignore destiny because of fear. The silver wolf has never been your burden. It has always been your inheritance. Others may one day search for its power, believing it grants dominion over every pack. They are wrong. The silver wolf was never created to rule. It was created to remind rulers that power without compassion eventually forgets its purpose. Aurora swallowed quietly as emotion tightened her throat. She continued reading. There will come a day when people who have never met you will begin searching for you. They will not know your face, but they will recognize the signs. Watch the skies. Watch the old symbols. And if the silver hawk returns, leave nothing unfinished, because the time of hiding will soon end. Aurora slowly lowered the letter. Almost as if summoned by those words, a distant cry echoed outside the cottage. She stepped onto the small porch and lifted her eyes toward the moonlit sky. High above the forest, the same silver hawk glided silently across the stars before disappearing beyond the northern mountains. A quiet shiver traveled through her. It no longer felt like coincidence. Hundreds of miles away, inside the royal archives prepared for the Alpha King, Rowan carefully rolled the ancient journal closed. Sleep refused to come. Every forgotten legend seemed to point toward the same impossible conclusion, yet reason urged caution. Before dawn, he summoned Ethan Mercer to the library. Ethan arrived carrying fresh maps of the Northern Territories. Rowan spread them across the heavy oak table. Tell me everything you know about the oldest families of Ash Hollow. Ethan studied the map for several moments. Most bloodlines are well documented. Farmers, healers, craftsmen, retired warriors. There is only one family with missing records. Rowan looked up immediately. Which one? The Hale family. Their genealogy disappears almost 100 years ago. Every record before that simply ends. Rowan frowned. Records do not disappear by themselves. Ethan nodded slowly. Exactly. Before either man could continue, another figure entered the room. Lady Beatrice Holloway, the royal historian, carried several weathered scrolls beneath one arm. "Your Majesty," she said respectfully, "I believe I found something connected to the symbol you described." She carefully unrolled a faded parchment across the table. At its center appeared a detailed drawing of a crescent moon embraced by delicate branches. Rowan immediately recognized it. He had seen the same symbol carved into the ancient journal only hours earlier. "What does it mean?" he asked. Beatrice traced the design with one finger. According to the oldest surviving accounts, this mark identified the keepers of the Silver Covenant. Their purpose was not political. They protected someone. Or perhaps something. Ethan exchanged a quiet glance with Rowan. Protected from whom? Beatrice hesitated before answering. From those who believed extraordinary gifts should belong to extraordinary rulers. Silence settled across the room. Rowan slowly folded the parchment. Every answer uncovered another mystery. Meanwhile, Ash Hollow awakened beneath a cool spring sunrise. Villagers prepared for another day of celebration while travelers packed wagons for the journey home. Aurora quietly reopened her herbal stand in the village square, determined to return to ordinary life despite the restless feeling growing inside her. She greeted familiar customers with the same gentle smile she had always worn, yet several people who had barely noticed her before now offered curious second glances. Word of Caleb Thornton's respectful public refusal had traveled through the neighboring packs overnight, and although no one blamed Aurora, many now regarded her with gentle sympathy. She accepted every kind word with grace. Shortly before noon, an elderly traveler wearing a weathered green cloak stopped before her table. His silver beard reached nearly to his chest, and his walking staff bore carvings unlike any Aurora had ever seen. He looked not at the herbs, but directly into her eyes. "Your grandmother once sold me mountain sage," he said warmly. Aurora smiled with polite surprise. "Then you knew Eleanor?" The old traveler nodded. "She told me that one day I might meet a young woman who looked ordinary while carrying the silence of ancient forests." Aurora felt her heartbeat quicken. "I do not understand." The traveler reached into his satchel and placed a tiny silver feather upon the table. "You will." Before Aurora could ask another question, voices echoed from the center of the square. Royal messengers had arrived with fresh announcements from the Alpha King. Villagers gathered eagerly while Aurora looked back toward the traveler. He was already gone. Only the small silver feather remained beside the bundles of lavender, shining softly beneath the afternoon sun as though waiting for someone else to recognize what it truly meant. The royal messenger waited until every villager had gathered around the stone fountain before unrolling a parchment marked with the crest of the Northern Crown. His voice carried clearly through the quiet square. "By the order of Alpha King Rowan Ashcroft, all pack leaders are requested to submit complete historical family records to the royal archives before the next full moon. The order applies to every known bloodline without exception." Curious whispers immediately spread across the crowd. Some wondered whether the king planned to revise old treaties. Others guessed he intended to settle long-forgotten land disputes. Aurora listened silently from behind her table of herbs, but something inside her tightened. Her grandmother had once warned that forgotten histories sometimes remained hidden because they were protecting someone rather than concealing shame. As the villagers slowly dispersed, pack leader Harrison Whitmore approached the messenger and accepted an official copy of the decree. His thoughtful expression suggested he was already considering which records still remained in Ash Hollow. Aurora quietly gathered the silver feather from her table and slipped it inside the pocket of her apron before returning to the cottage. She could not explain why, but every new event seemed to be moving toward the same invisible destination. That evening, she opened Eleanor's letter once more, reading every sentence with greater attention than before. One line stood apart from all the others. "When the past begins searching for itself, do not run from the truth. Only run from those who wish to possess it." Aurora slowly folded the letter. The words no longer sounded like distant advice. They felt like a warning arriving exactly when it was needed. At the royal residence, Rowan stood beside a tall window overlooking the moonlit valley while Lady Beatrice Holloway organized another collection of ancient scrolls across a large oak table. Ethan Mercer entered carrying a sealed leather case recently delivered from the oldest monastery in the eastern mountains. "The monks answered your request," he said. Rowan immediately opened the case. Inside rested a weathered map surrounded by handwritten notes copied from texts so fragile the originals could no longer leave the monastery. Beatrice carefully studied the faded symbols before tracing one location with her finger. There used to be a sanctuary here, she explained. Long before the first Alpha Kingdom existed. Rowan followed her hand. The abandoned sanctuary had once stood less than 5 miles from present-day Ash Hollow. Ethan looked up with visible surprise. That cannot be coincidence. Beatrice quietly nodded. Nothing involving the Silver Covenant was ever coincidence. Rowan folded the map with deliberate care. We leave for the sanctuary at sunrise. The following morning, the forest surrounding Ash Hollow seemed unusually still. Even the birds sang more softly beneath the towering pines. Aurora carried a basket of medicinal herbs toward the creek, where several rare flowers bloomed each spring. She welcomed the familiar solitude, hoping the peaceful routine would quiet the growing questions inside her mind. As she knelt beside the stream, she noticed something unexpected. Fresh footprints marked the damp soil along the opposite bank. They were not made by deer or wolves. They belonged to travelers wearing heavy boots unlike those worn by local villagers. Aurora gently touched one of the prints. It had been made only hours earlier. Nearby, she discovered another object resting beneath a fern. A small piece of dark fabric embroidered with a silver crescent surrounded by black thread. The symbol was unfamiliar, yet the careful stitching suggested it belonged to an organized group rather than an ordinary traveler. A cool breeze swept through the clearing, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke from somewhere deeper within the forest. Aurora instinctively looked toward the distant ridge where the silver hawk had disappeared the night before. The bracelet around her wrist warmed again, not with urgency, but with quiet recognition, as though it sensed unseen eyes watching from beyond the trees. She calmly stood, placed the embroidered cloth inside her basket, and returned toward the village by a different trail. She remembered another lesson Eleanor had repeated countless times. When the forest grows too quiet, listen more carefully than ever before. Several hours later, Rowan and his companions reached the forgotten sanctuary hidden beneath thick vines and ancient cedar trees. Time had reduced much of the structure to broken stone covered with moss. Yet one circular platform remained perfectly intact beneath the open sky. Strange carvings surrounded its edge, untouched by weather despite centuries of rain and snow. Beatrice brushed away loose leaves before quietly reading the oldest inscription aloud. The guardian shall remain unseen until the moon calls both protector and witness together. One will carry the ancient light, the other will recognize it. Rowan felt the now familiar stirring deep within his wolf. It was stronger than ever. Ethan looked toward him with growing concern. You already know who this is about, do not you? Rowan remained silent for several moments before answering with complete honesty. I know only one thing. Every road we follow somehow leads back to Aurora Hale. At that same moment, miles away, Aurora reached the edge of the village and paused. Standing outside her grandmother's cottage was the elderly traveler in the green cloak. He smiled gently as though he had expected her return. Before she could speak, he lifted his eyes toward the bright afternoon sky where the silver hawk circled once above the trees. The waiting is almost over, he said softly. The ones searching for the silver wolf have begun moving again, and whether they know it or not, every step they take is bringing them closer to you. The old traveler waited until the silver hawk disappeared beyond the clouds before speaking again. His weathered face carried the calm certainty of someone who had watched countless seasons pass without losing faith in what was meant to happen. Your grandmother understood something that very few ever did, he said softly. The greatest gifts are not protected by walls. They are protected by patience. Aurora held the folded letter close to her heart, while studying the stranger more carefully than ever before. Who are you? She asked. The old man smiled gently. A messenger who arrived many years later than intended. Before Aurora could ask another question, he reached into the sleeve of his green cloak and produced a small wooden medallion carved with the same crescent moon embraced by delicate branches that she had seen on her grandmother's hidden stone. The moment Aurora's eyes settled upon the symbol, the silver bracelet around her wrist grew warmer than it ever had before. It did not burn. Instead, it filled her with a quiet sense of recognition, as though an old memory had awakened without using words. You have seen this mark before. the traveler observed. Aurora nodded slowly. My grandmother never explained it, because it was never her story to tell. The old man carefully placed the medallion into her hand. When the right witness arrives, truth no longer hides behind silence. Before Aurora could respond, a familiar voice echoed from the nearby path. Aurora. She turned to see pack leader Harrison Whitmore approaching the cottage with measured steps. His expression remained respectful, yet curiosity lingered behind his eyes. The royal delegation has requested access to the oldest family records, he explained. Most of the village archives are incomplete. I remembered your grandmother kept journals. If there is anything connected to the Hale family, the crown would appreciate your cooperation. Aurora instinctively glanced toward the traveler, but the place where he had been standing only moments earlier was now empty. No footprints disturbed the soft earth. No sound suggested he had walked away. Only the faint scent of cedar remained in the evening air. Harrison noticed her searching the clearing. Is everything all right? Aurora smiled politely. Yes, I was only remembering someone. Harrison nodded kindly. There is no rush. Whenever you are ready. After he departed, Aurora entered the cottage and opened the old cedar chest once more. Beneath neatly folded blankets rested 3 leather journals belonging to Eleanor. Most pages contained recipes for herbal remedies, notes about changing seasons, and observations about the forest. Yet hidden inside the final journal, she discovered a folded map marked with the same crescent symbol. A single sentence had been written beside it. When the guardian is finally seen, the sanctuary must welcome both hearts together. Aurora quietly traced the faded ink with her fingertips. She did not fully understand the message, but one detail immediately stood out. The sanctuary marked on the map rested only a short walk beyond the northern ridge. At almost the exact same hour, Rowan Ashcroft stood upon the weathered stones of that forgotten sanctuary, while Lady Beatrice carefully examined another ancient inscription newly revealed beneath layers of moss. Sunlight shifted across the carved symbols until one sentence became visible. Beatrice read slowly, allowing every word to settle into the stillness surrounding them. Neither crown nor blood shall awaken the ancient promise. Only compassion freely chosen will reveal the hidden light. Ethan looked thoughtfully toward Rowan. That sounds less like a prophecy and more like a test. Rowan nodded. Perhaps every king before us searched for power and overlooked character. He walked toward the center of the circular platform, where a smooth stone reflected the afternoon sky. As soon as he stepped onto its surface, his wolf stirred again. This time the sensation became unmistakable. It was not commanding him. It was inviting him. A breeze swept through the sanctuary carrying the scent of wild lavender. Rowan immediately recognized it. The same delicate fragrance had lingered around Aurora's herbal stand on the morning they first met. Ethan watched Rowan's expression change. You felt it again. Stronger than before, Rowan admitted quietly. It is almost as if this place remembers someone who has not arrived yet. At that very moment, many miles away, Aurora folded the map into her satchel. She slipped the wooden medallion beside it, wrapped her grandmother's journals carefully in cloth, and fastened the silver bracelet more securely around her wrist. As she stepped outside, the evening sun dipped behind the mountains, bathing the forest in soft golden light. The silver hawk appeared once more, gliding silently above the northern ridge before circling exactly once over the hidden sanctuary. Neither Aurora nor Rowan knew the other had already begun seeking. 2 separate journeys, guided by different questions, were slowly leading toward the same forgotten place. Neither understood how close destiny had become, yet both felt the same quiet certainty growing stronger with every passing hour, as though the forest itself had finally decided that the time for waiting was almost over. A pale mist settled across the northern forest before sunrise as Aurora followed the faded map through narrow paths, almost completely hidden beneath ancient cedar branches. Every step carried her farther from familiar trails and closer to a place that had existed only in whispered stories. The wooden medallion rested against her palm, while the silver bracelet around her wrist pulsed with a quiet rhythm that seemed to answer the heartbeat of the forest itself. Birds greeted the morning with gentle songs, yet beneath their voices another sound slowly emerged. It was not a howl. It was not the wind. It resembled a distant chorus humming a melody so old that no living person could have remembered where it began. Aurora paused beside a circle of smooth, standing stones covered in moss. The map ended there. Beyond the stones stood the forgotten sanctuary, its graceful arches wrapped in flowering vines that had protected it from the passing centuries. Sunlight poured through the broken roof, illuminating the circular platform at its center exactly as if the ancient builders had known this moment would someday arrive. Aurora stepped forward carefully. The instant her foot touched the worn stone floor, the silver bracelet became warm enough that she instinctively reached for it. Soft light flowed beneath the delicate threads without causing pain. The carved symbols surrounding the platform shimmered faintly before settling into a gentle silver glow. Aurora looked around in quiet amazement. Nothing felt frightening. Everything felt familiar, almost like returning to a home she had somehow forgotten. On the opposite side of the sanctuary, Rowan Ashcroft, Ethan Mercer, and Lady Beatrice Holloway emerged through another vine-covered entrance after completing their survey of the surrounding ruins. Rowan stopped immediately. His wolf became perfectly still, listening with complete attention. The mysterious presence he had sensed for days no longer drifted like a distant memory. It stood only a few yards away. Ethan noticed Rowan's expression and followed his gaze across the ancient platform. There, bathed in soft morning light, stood Aurora Hale. She looked just as surprised to see them as they were to see her. For several quiet seconds no one spoke. Only the gentle breeze moved through the open sanctuary carrying the fragrance of cedar and wild lavender. Aurora offered a respectful bow. "Your Majesty." Rowan returned the gesture with equal courtesy. "Miss Hale, I did not expect to find anyone here." Aurora smiled gently. "Neither did I." Lady Beatrice slowly walked toward one of the carved pillars surrounding the platform. Her eyes widened as she recognized the symbols now glowing beneath the morning sun. "This sanctuary has awakened," she whispered almost to herself. "It has not done that for centuries." Ethan examined the carvings more closely. New lines of silver light spread quietly through the stone floor, connecting every ancient symbol until they formed one complete design surrounding Aurora's feet. She instinctively stepped back, but the glowing pattern moved with her as though acknowledging her presence rather than trapping it. Rowan watched silently. The calm respect in Aurora's face never faded despite the impossible sight unfolding around her. There was no pride, no fear, only quiet wonder. Lady Beatrice carefully opened one of the weathered scrolls she had carried from the royal archives. Her voice trembled slightly as she read the ancient words aloud. "When the forgotten guardian returns willingly to the sacred circle, the sanctuary shall remember before the people do. Stone shall awaken before blood. Light shall awaken before names." The final sentence caused every person present to fall silent. "And the rightful witness shall recognize the guardian without command." Rowan slowly lowered his eyes toward the glowing symbols surrounding Aurora. Nothing forced him forward. No magic compelled his thoughts. Yet deep within him, every instinct inherited from generations of Alpha Kings answered with complete certainty. His wolf did not see an ordinary Omega standing upon ancient stone. It recognized someone carrying a responsibility older than every throne built afterward. Rowan took one slow step forward, then another. Aurora watched quietly, uncertain what was happening, yet strangely unafraid. As Rowan reached the edge of the glowing circle, something remarkable occurred. The sunlight filling the sanctuary shifted into brilliant silver. Tiny points of light drifted gently through the air like floating petals. The bracelet around Aurora's wrist loosened on its own, slipping harmlessly into her waiting hand. Beneath it, delicate silver markings slowly appeared across her skin for the first time since childhood. They did not resemble wounds or scars. They shimmered like graceful branches reflecting moonlight upon calm water. Ethan drew a careful breath. Lady Beatrice lowered her scroll with tears quietly gathering in her eyes. Rowan understood at last why every forgotten road, every ancient record, and every restless instinct had guided him to this place. Without hesitation, without embarrassment, and without anyone asking it of him, he lowered himself onto one knee before Aurora. It was not surrender. It was not obligation. It was recognition. The oldest law had awakened inside his soul long before his mind understood its meaning. Aurora stared at him in complete disbelief, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Rowan lifted his eyes with calm certainty. honoring the one my ancestors promised would never be forgotten, even if the world forgot her name. At that exact moment, the silver hawk descended silently from the bright morning sky and settled upon the highest arch of the sanctuary, watching in peaceful silence as ancient promises finally began returning to life. Aurora could not find words as the morning breeze carried silver light through the ancient sanctuary, and Alpha King Rowan Ashcroft remained on one knee before her with quiet dignity. She had spent her entire life believing she was the forgotten Omega no one would ever truly see. Yet the oldest tradition in the Northern Territories had recognized her before she had even begun to understand herself. Slowly she stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. "Please rise," she said gently. "I have never asked anyone to bow before me." Rowan lifted his eyes first, then slowly stood. There was no hesitation in his expression and no trace of regret. "You did not ask," he answered with a calm smile. "The promise was never yours to demand. It was ours to remember." Lady Beatrice carefully rolled the ancient scroll, closed while tears of relief glimmered in her eyes. "For generations we believed these records described a legend that had already passed into history," she whispered. "We never imagined history had simply been waiting." Ethan Mercer looked toward Aurora with newfound respect. Every assumption he had carried about strength suddenly seemed incomplete. The greatest power standing before them had spent years healing the sick, gathering herbs, and quietly serving people who rarely noticed her kindness. None of those simple acts had diminished who she truly was. They had revealed it. Aurora looked down at the delicate silver markings glowing across her wrist. Instead of fear, she felt peace. The ancient presence within her no longer seemed hidden or distant. It felt like another heartbeat quietly breathing beside her own, patient, gentle, and filled with endless compassion. The silver hawk resting high above the sanctuary spread its wings once before soaring into the bright blue sky. As it disappeared beyond the trees, the glowing symbols beneath the ancient stones slowly faded, their purpose fulfilled. Rowan turned toward the entrance of the sanctuary before looking back at Aurora. "There will be many questions waiting beyond this forest," he said honestly. "Some will celebrate what happened here. Others may struggle to understand it. But no one will decide your future except you." Aurora smiled with quiet gratitude. Those words meant more to her than any title ever could. Together, they walked from the sanctuary toward Ash Hollow, where news of the remarkable morning had already begun spreading from traveler to traveler. By the time they reached the village square, families gathered with expressions ranging from surprise to wonder. Pack leader Harrison Whitmore stepped forward first. He looked from Rowan to Aurora before lowering his head respectfully. "Miss Hale," he said softly, "I owe you an apology. We believed we knew every story carried by our own people, yet we never truly asked about yours." Aurora gently shook her head. "There is nothing to apologize for. We all inherit only part of the truth until we choose to keep learning." Her answer carried neither bitterness nor pride, only kindness. One by one, villagers who had once overlooked her offered warm smiles, grateful greetings, and sincere respect. Caleb Thornton approached with quiet humility. "Thank you for your grace during the moon trial," he said. "I believed I understood what strength looked like. Today I realized I still have much to learn." Aurora accepted his words with the same gentle warmth she offered everyone else. Over the following weeks, Rowan ordered the forgotten histories of every pack to be carefully preserved instead of hidden away. Ancient traditions were studied with new understanding, and old divisions between powerful families and ordinary villagers slowly began to soften. The sanctuary was restored, not as a royal monument, but as a place where anyone seeking wisdom or peace could visit beneath the open sky. Aurora chose not to live inside the royal palace. She remained close to the forest she loved, continuing to gather herbs, care for injured animals, and help anyone who knocked on her door regardless of rank or title. Rowan often visited the sanctuary, where they spoke not about power or politics, but about compassion, responsibility, and the kind of future both hoped to build. Their friendship grew from mutual respect rather than expectation, and the people of the Northern Territories soon discovered that the strongest partnerships were never formed through fear, but through trust freely given. Children who once heard frightening stories about forgotten legends instead grew up hearing a different lesson. They learned that true greatness often walks quietly through ordinary days, unnoticed until the right moment arrives. They learned that kindness is never weakness, patience is never failure, and the brightest light sometimes belongs to the person who spent years allowing others to shine first. Long after the seasons changed and new generations filled the forests with laughter, travelers still visited the old sanctuary where wildflowers bloomed between weathered stones beneath endless silver moonlight. They would pause before the ancient carvings and remember the day a quiet healer stepped into forgotten history, the day a king honored a promise older than every crown, and the day the Northern Territories finally understood that the greatest guardian was never chosen because she desired power. She was chosen because even while carrying extraordinary strength within her heart, she never stopped choosing compassion above everything else.